think, having spent more time thinking about it, that the death of my sister, which as a parent losing a child, has got to be one of the hardest things to endure. Right. And I think they probably did a great job getting through that. But it had to have had implications. I think my mom has said things like, maybe I paid a little bit less attention to you guys because I was so overly focused on the one that was in the hospital all the time. So there's something that happened in that period of time that has created the person that I am, and I don't blame my parents at all. They did the best. They did a great job. You know what I mean? And there's things that my parents did that I'm trying to change with my kids. You know what I mean? So you're always reflecting on like this. I didn't like that about my upbringing, so I'm gonna try and do some things differently. But
So like what? Are you avoiding?
No, I'll just say blank, and you know this because you spent a lot of time with my parents. They're extremely black and white. You know what I mean? I was raised in a black and white environment, and I used to be proud of that because I was very convicted. I used to think I was going to get into politics because I was like, "This is the right way: capitalism, freedom. I have all the right answers," and I don't like living like that at all. Like life is way too complex to think that you have all the right answers. You know what I mean? That's why bipartisan political bodies makes no sense because they can't be right 100% of the time and we can't be right 100% of the time. So compromise, willingness to be compassionate towards people with different perspectives. And actually this hit when I went through my divorce because I thought I had it all. I was checking all the right boxes. Good family, good career, good relationship. And then when that all just came crashing down, I had way more compassion for other people. So if you go into a grocery store and the person behind you or the cashier is being really rude to you, and normally it would have been like, get your stuff together, you know what I mean? Like, don't act like that, you know what I mean? Because you should be, Right. But I having gone through some trauma in my life, I can look at that person and go, geez, I wonder what they're going through.
Right.
Maybe they just left the courtroom and their wife of 10 years just left them, you know what I mean? I'd be cranky too.
Right.
So not living in a black, now that's my default, that's my preset, and I see it come out with my kids. So I still have this kind of like, political gusto, like, oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket and we need to do that. But I try to correct myself and pull back and be like, you know what? Everybody, and I don't want to be new agey, like everybody's on their own path and all that kind of stuff. Because there are, I believe in absolute truths that people need to be convicted by. But, so being a little bit more, compassion. Actually, anybody that knows me tells me I have zero compassion. So that's something I'm working on. But at least just acknowledging that that's an area of growth, you know what I mean? And certainly being compassionate towards your kids because they're going through all kinds of stuff that you know and don't know about, you know what I mean? But the one thing I want to say is my parents had wild journeys growing up through the 60s and 70s, and when they came together and they...
60s? Oh, they came up.
Growing up,
okay, yes. I thought you meant you. Yeah.
So they lived a free and wild life for a period of time, but when they had us, Jana, me, and then my sister Jenny, and she passed away, that solidified their faith. So they really turned to their faith and their belief in Jesus Christ as like the solidifying thing to help them through that period, and that's what they passed on to us. And I'm very thankful for that because, this is a whole nother discussion, but I've gone through a crazy arc on my own spiritual faith, most of the time running away from it, you know what I mean? Based on a strong misunderstanding of like who God is and the craziness of the world, and not being able to rectify between loving God and the chaos and tragedy of the world. But again, on this last 2-year cycle that I'm on, I've been able to make enormous progress on surrendering a lot of that stuff because I think a lot of times we run away from, this is meandering, but we are absolutely spiritual beings. And I won't let, this is back to my black and white, I won't let anybody tell me otherwise, because if you spend any time with your consciousness, like this bubble that we have, which is a wild, miraculous, wondrous thing, you can't tell me that there isn't a spirit, like some uniqueness, some spiritual element to everything that we're doing. We are not just animals, you know what I mean? Right. So I believe that there's a spiritual life, which is why I think the wellness journey of mind, body, and spirit is really important. And I'm very thankful for the way that my parents raised me and the fundamentals that they taught me. I'm doing things differently now with the application of that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's okay to just believe. I think you need to know why you believe. You know what I mean? Like, if you just believe, you just show up in institutions. Like, I'm a Republican, so you go vote Republican.
Right.
I'm a, and pick any institution that you're associated with. Like, why are you actually there? You know what I mean? Have you actually spent the time reflecting like what your belief system is, and then coming up with ways to put that into practice? You know what I mean? And that's what I'm like. I hope my kids believe the same things that I believe, but I'd rather them spend time critically thinking why they believe it,
right,
than to just do it because I told them to do it.
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you made that path yourself,
right,
it's gonna be more to you.
Yeah. But yeah, I loved how I grew up, and I like seeing my kids playing outside, and I don't have a lot of problems with them being tethered to their phones or
right.
that kind of stuff, because I think that's important. But I also know that every parent gets it wrong, and there's going to be things that I'm doing now that are gonna, my kids are gonna show up in therapy 20 years from now. Which I'm pro therapy. I go to therapy. Like, I think it's important to work your stuff out. But there'll be stuff that I've done that are, when my kids are 30, 40, they're gonna be like, yeah, I kind of got that from dad or whatever.
Right.
So
it'll be interesting when they're raising their own kids.
Yeah, and that's when you start to realize you're like,
oh, they didn't like this part.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you spank your kids at all? Because
No.
It's interesting how that's gone away.
Yeah.
For understandable reasons.
Yeah.
But
I say no, but I think like when they're 2 or 3 and you give them a little tap just to kind of like, hey, pay attention, you know what I mean? But
right.
I remember like when I was 10, 11, I'd still be put over my dad's knee with a hairbrush. And I remember there was that one time where he spanked me and I just started laughing because I was like, this doesn't hurt anymore. Right. And then it was like, all right, we're done with that type of discipline. But that was just traditional at the time.
Yeah. Both my parents being racquetball players had nasty.
Yeah.
But D actually, it was kind of it. So D and I get together. She had already had 2 kids from a previous marriage, and this is one of my favorite stories. Jeff, when he'd like do something really wrong, D's like, I'm getting the belt, and she'd grab the belt and go snap, and Jeff would start like throwing up. Yeah. He's never once been hit by the belt. I don't think he's ever seen the belt.
Yeah.
But that no.
Yeah.
But there's something amount of that it could be something that keeps you in line a little bit as a kid. That there's repercussions if I do something wrong, and appropriate to the level of what I did wrong. And I think that's lost a lot on some parents. And to me, like, if there's one thing I wish I could help parents with, which like you'll see in the grocery store a kid throwing a tantrum. It's like, and then they'll just give them the thing or whatever. It's like, oh my God, like how do you not see how that spirals?
Right.
To me, that's probably the number one thing I think parents get wrong is just not thinking of having that. It's such a simple one. Like my kids, I don't remember my kids ever once throwing a tantrum.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because as soon as they did something I didn't want them doing, they didn't get what they wanted.
Right.
And if you do it early, it's a real simple thing. It's like you're acting like this, you don't get the cookie or whatever it is.
Right.
Yeah. But my parents spanked, like you said. I think a couple little whacks. They'll tell you it was a little harder than it was. I think there might have been one where like, I think Kaylin got one, and it was it happened a little harder than I expected, and that's where I was like, okay, I hurt her a little bit, and not anywhere near to a point of abuse, but it's like, oh, I could see how this is a slippery slope. This. Yeah, but yeah, I think and this is so some of these other ones I've pondered a lot of this. This is one I haven't so much, this topic, but something interesting recently. So a couple years ago, before my grandfather passed on, my mother's father, he went through a stage where he's like apologizing for being the worst father ever.
Yeah.
My grandfather was awesome.
Right.
And I can't imagine him being a bad father.
Right.
And my mother made this whole humorous thing for him of all the things he did wrong, like slow children sign at the end of the street telling us we're all slow children early on. Things like that. Right. My dad recently has been kind of is saying that kind of stuff. Like I wasn't like Father's Day this year. Like I wasn't that good of a father. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like all my friends thought you were like
I love you,
the
Dad.
coolest. you're the one they all knew. You're the one that your dad's the best. And I've been
He's a spitting image of George Curtis. Oh my gosh, when I saw him at the camp, it was like I was looking at George.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't know where that comes from or why he would think that way. Maybe more involvement. It's interesting because my dad was a minister, if you don't know.
Yeah.
My dad's such an antisocial person. It's such a funny thing that he.
Right.
I can't wait to talk to him about this stuff. Like.
Right.
But I wonder why that comes up. I wonder where his regrets are. But I've been thinking of myself. And
I think family is one of the hardest things that we navigate in this world because you can change jobs, you can change your health, you can change a lot of things. You can't change your family. And so I think, over the course of 60, 70, 80 years, you know what I mean? There's just so many times. And that's an area that I struggle with family and the way we do things versus the way that other people do things. And, it's a constant, and you're always kind of pulled back to it. And so I think there's a lot of times where, you do the best with what you have, you know what I mean? But in looking back, you know what I mean? Like, there was no way to like pull away and reset, you know what I mean? You're just constantly, thrust into it.
Right.
Which is why there's a lot of really dysfunctional families, you know what I mean?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack in the Curtis Porter Townge family environment, you know what I mean? So like one of the ways that I was raised was, no matter what happens, family always comes back together. Always, right? There's always birthday parties and holidays and stuff like that. And some of those holidays and birthday parties, we had some unbelievable liberals and unbelievable conservatives and some people that believed in were ministers and other people that were atheists, all under the same roof, and it was explosive. You know what I mean? I don't know if you remember that, but I remember being very explosive. And then it was like, all right, see you at Christmas. You know what I mean? It was just right back at it. You know what I mean? And for better or worse, because everybody has different opinions on that. Like, is there a point where you draw a line and say, okay, I'm moving away from this family environment, or do you just go back every single time as a family? And that because of that, and I think we tend to always continue to come back as a family. That has to create situations where you look back over a 70-year span and be like, yeah, I could have done better. Right. You know what I mean? So, but I'm taking a lot of comfort in, and I learned this early, I learned this through my divorce, but I think that what kids need is love. That's really it. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if they had everything or had nothing. If what they really need is love and stability. You know what I mean? So when we went to counseling after the divorce, basically the message was, don't air your stuff in front of your kids. They just need to know that their mom and dad still love them and that they're going to always love them and they'll bounce back, right? And they'll be resilient, you know what I mean? And I think we've been successful in doing that. So, if you're being overly critical of their career choices, their education choices, their hobbies, and you're not just taking a step back and just showing them like unconditional love, that's when I think you get into a lot of trouble. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I'm not to say that my parents have loved me unconditionally because I've put them through hell. You know what I mean? For sure. But I think that's what I'm holding on to. That's I'll consider that at the finish line a success if my kids feel like they were safe and peaceful around me.
Loved.
Yeah, and loved. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a stat I heard once that was like they did a study of all these different learning types of programs to see what was more successful. At the end, there was no difference between all of this fast. But the one predictor of success was that parents were involved.
Yeah.
It didn't matter which one you chose.
It's such a sad stat because parents are becoming more and more disengaged. You know what I mean? They think that the right outcome is making it easier for their kids to have success in the future. Right. And that is almost guaranteed to be the opposite. You know what I mean? So.
And you can be the greatest parent in the world and it doesn't. Your kid ends up. But I also want to say to my father, like, where he thinks he's a bad parent, like, aren't you proud of me?
Yeah.
Because you
did this.
You raised me to who I am.
Right.
The man I am. The man I am is because of you.
Right.
And mom. I mean, you've had more influence on my life than any other two individuals.
Right.
So take pride in that.
Yeah.
Hopefully,
Right.
maybe they are completely disappointed, but I don't think so.